welcome to the MTT podcast. Today we're talking about parents and the craziness of parents. You know, in past podcasts I've had on strength and conditioning coach Chris Kerr. You know, I've had on different specialties in terms of how do we prepare mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And I don't know if you guys have watched the podcast on what does every parent want or what every coach wants. But Dave Bennett goes back with me many, many years on what coaches want. But today I want to talk about what do parents want out of their athletes. And Dave, I'm just, we've had so much fun on podcasts. We did the Ply Rigger podcast, and I'm just so thankful for you here today. And who knows what's going to spin up in our minds here, but it's going to be fun. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, man. I'm excited to be here. I'm already ready and braced for how many Philadelphia Flyers shots are coming my way. But don't forget, they're 2-0, baby. They're 2-0. Gritty is alive and well.
Oh my gosh, Gritty and the Flyers fan. So for the people that are watching out there, Dave's a Flyers fan, so that says a lot about him.
What says more about you is the fact that you gifted me a Flyers jacket a few years ago.
Well,
so that
it's
was really
because I
kind.
love you, man. I absolutely love you.
Awesome.
So there's that.
Awesome.
Let's talk about what parents want as a coach, as a parent, as being mentally tough. We've had so many discussions over the years about being mentally tough or being mentally prepared. What do you think a parent wants when they put their child in sports? What's your perspective?
I mean, I think parents say one thing, but I think they really want something else, right? I think every parent secretly is saying, I wonder if my kid's got the it factor. I wonder if my kid could do something really great. I mean, what they want, and that they'll tell you, is they want their kid to have fun. Hey, if my kid ever wants to stop playing, I'll support him. We'll walk away from the sport, no problem. And the problem becomes as they get older and they get better, and then they kind of climb their ranks into more of an elite level. It's pretty hard if your kid wants to stop, because you begin having dreams about what they could do, whether whatever rank, whether it's collegiately, professionally, a mix of both. And I think at the end of the day, the things that they want govern their actions, right? And what you see on the sideline or in a conversation between a parent and a kid, it really starts to kind of shine through.
Yeah, it's interesting that I've said this in most of my workshops that sports adds pressure, and when you add pressure, it brings out already existing issues. And so I know we were talking earlier about refs, and like all that time and energy put into the sport, and then the referees make a bad call and the parents go ballistic. And now I know you've never been one of those parents.
No, I might have done it a couple times. I try to have good emotional intelligence so that I make I make Dave Jones proud. But I mean, at the end of the day, and I think I told you, before we started, is that, our club just sent out a message this last week, and we're, preseason was in August, season starts officially kind of in September. It's only a couple months in, and they send out an email to remind everybody, hey, everybody, remember, you all signed a code of conduct as a parent. You don't need to be going after these referees and the other fans and everything else. And they said, especially because we have a referee shortage. So please make sure you're kind to them. And I think parents forget a lot of times that these referees are just like they are. They make mistakes. They don't see what you see. They're at a different angle. They're not trying to decide a game for one team. I mean, if they are, there's a whole set of, reality that's going to hit them pretty hard if they get caught. But I mean, at the end of the day, you've got officials that are there to try to do a job, not to have to manage a parent's emotions.
That's good. You mentioned the it factor. Let's talk about that. Do your kids have the it factor?
That's a great question. I've got two that are, training and competing right now at the highest level you can get to from a club soccer standpoint. And, I would tell you one does, the other one is working pretty hard to get there. That it factor is that edge. That it factor is the ability to push themselves beyond where they may, You may think they can go. They're willing to let the coach push them there. They've got this unbelievable ability to rise to the occasion. I think back to a podcast you and I did where it was some crazy stat about, youth all-stars, right? And there's so
Age-specific
many,
all-stars.
yeah, there's so many age-specific all-stars that never make it long-term. And the pro athletes that do are the ones that methodically have that it factor. They get better and better and better and just don't stop. They don't have to be the live wire in the locker room, but they just have the ability to work, and their work rate's great, and what they're able to produce is great. And so, I've seen, my second son, where my first son is kind of has that. I've watched my second son kind of begin to develop his own kind of it factor, but it's very different than the first. It's that ability to rise to the occasion. I think when your number's called and you've got to find a way to make something happen, whether it's a goaltender and you have to make a save, or it's somebody's got to score a goal because you're getting toward the end of the game. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to happen, and those kids that have it a lot of times find themselves, where you got to be to deliver. It's pretty wild.
I think about the it factor now that I've been at this for a while, and I think about it in terms of, is my son, is he accountable? Is he a man of God? Is he diligent? Is he persistent? As the it factor. I've worked with enough athletes over the years now to know that they're all headed to the BHL, which is the beer hockey league. No matter if you're playing in the AHL, the NHL, the ECHL, club hockey, Division I hockey, everybody heads to, the beer league. And, the it factor to me is being, a representative of your community, is being accountable, is being that person that people trust. I think that as parents, we're so narrow focused that we think about the it factor in terms of, are they going to play at the highest level possible? And that would be a reflection of the parent, that, oh, they only played Division III. That's a reflection of me, which is just not true. It's just a lie from the devil, So the it factor to me is more of a broader approach of being a great human, not necessarily a great player. What do you think about that?
No, I love that. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, you're trying to produce people that are going to make a difference in their community. I mean, one of the things I love right now, I live in the state of Florida, and a lot of the kids on these higher level teams are also coaching 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, and they're not just coaching them in terms of, how to play a sport. They're coaching them of what happens when something goes wrong. How do you stay in the game? How don't you run to the sideline or skate to the end of the ice to find your parent and get the hug that you need? How do you stay tough? And these kids are giving back to their communities in such a way through hours and hours to where, they're providing that impact and, inviting these kids to come watch them play. So you can see what it means to stay focused, to be mentally tough, to get up when life kicks you down. I mean, I think back to, my time in athletics, as I'm sure you do too. There's so many lessons to be learned on when the game doesn't go right, or when you get a freak injury. How do you battle back from that? I mean, you and I have talked about before about the whole idea of identity, right? The it factor when it comes to identity is nuts, because how many pro athletes fully understand what their identity is? I mean, think about what happened this last year in pro football. How long was Tom Brady retired? Right? I mean, at the end of the day, you do got to start asking yourself, what's your identity, Tom? Like, what are you doing? Right? Serena, she just retired. Roger Federer, he just retired. And you remember, how many times did Michael Jordan retire and come back? Brett Favre retire and come back? We see this issue of identity all the time. And I think as parents, can we be good enough? Can we serve our kids well enough to be honest enough to help them understand your identity is not what happens on the ice. Your identity is not what happens in the weight room. Your identity is what happens when a situation stares you straight in the face and you make the right decision, even if it costs you.
Yeah.
That's where identity comes to play.
Over the years, I've used this analogy of, Tom Bradshaw, the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers back in the 70s. And, he was very much clinically depressed after he won his second Super Bowl because his vision was his mission.
That's right.
And so when your vision becomes your mission, when you accomplish that mission, your identity then gets attacked. And so what's special to me is really understanding that our identity is much bigger than our performance. And a lot of times as parents, we drive performance with language. One of the examples I think you and I have talked about over the years is good job, buddy. So good job, buddy is a performance related response when they come out of the locker room or come off the field or ice. And, because you want to edify them, but the reality is that's a performance question or comment versus, I love watching you play. So I love to watch you play is a better comment than good job, buddy, because now it's whether they play 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 8 minutes, whether they scored or not. I love watching you.
Sorry, go ahead, buddy.
Go ahead.
No, I'm about a year and a half now, thanks to you, into this idea of eradicating good job. Okay. And at first I was like, okay, yeah, I'll tell him I like being with him. That's cool. But then after a while, I'm like, I keep saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've got to find a way to mix it up. And so what I found now, about a year and a half later, is it morphs into a lot of different things. Like, we were in South Florida this last weekend for 2 games, and we got in the car, and he played pretty good. He had a couple tough breaks, but he played pretty good. And I said, I love your leadership on the field. I love how you encourage, but I love how you're tough too. I love how you're hard nosed. I love the fact that when something goes wrong, you do not let it destroy you.
Yeah.
Because sports, as you talk about, is a petri dish for emotions, and you've got to find a way that if something doesn't go your way and you give up a goal that maybe you're upset about, that maybe that it's a penalty shot that's not your fault, but you still had to give up that goal because it got past you, or it was a bang bang play. What are you going to do? As a goalkeeper, you feel responsible for some of that, but we can talk through that and say, look at this. Look at where you were. Look at how you encouraged. Look at how you got in a couple kids' faces who actually needed it. And that's a role that you got to play. You don't get to be everybody's best friend all the time. But, we talk through the actual kind of mental and emotional toll that it takes to go through a game. And let's call out the things that were really good that you can then use in your day-to-day life as you come out of this, right? Is, how you got upset today, how do you treat your sibling tomorrow, right? It all lives in some of that same places. And as a parent, I think, and this is where I've learned a lot from you, is my job is connect that dot for him. He may not be ready to do that, but if I can connect that dot behaviorally, it goes a really long way. And that's where good job, buddy, just takes on a completely different deal. And we're talking about behaviors. We're not talking about an award system with words.
That's great. I never thought about that. An award system with words. That's great. That's awesome, man. I love your courage. I love your leadership. I love how you handle yourself in that situation. You know what? That just opens up the dialogue for you to have a really awesome, in-depth conversation versus good job, buddy. And now they're justifying, no, I didn't do a good job. That's not what coach said. Yeah, well, I thought you did. Now it's kind of this conflict conversation versus I love your courage. I love your leadership. That's powerful, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a different conversation, right? That's exactly what it is. And you're going from, again, a point system to behavior.
Yeah, that's a big shift to think about that.
No doubt.
Define their behavior. It does take a
No
lot
doubt.
of courage, right, to play sports and
Yep.
to mess up and still come out of the valley with great accountability and discipline.
Yep, exactly.
So when we talk about the it factor, let's just recap there. The it factor is not necessarily your performance. Your it factor can be related to behavior and how they exemplify that behavior.
That's right.
That's
right.
That's good. We're talking about coping strategies and mental toughness. As a parent, what's one coping strategy that you would like to see for your son
Oh my
or
gosh.
sons? Sorry.
I think the two are so different. I think at times they get really hard on themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and we've got to find a way so that you can be hard on yourself, but you got to make sure it doesn't destroy you too. you know back in, I'm going to date myself a little bit, back in the 90s, when during my athletic career, there wasn't a lot written out there on sports psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading out of this little publication, the sport I was playing, and this just got me because I was a goalkeeper. And I used to just lose my mind when I would give up a goal. Sometimes it would tank me for a while. I'd get really upset. And what I found in this article, it said, our sport's played outside, um, where you give up a goal, the game starts again, and you bend down and you pick up a blade of grass and you put all your anger, all your frustration, all your emotion into that blade of grass until you can't put any more in there while play is happening. And when you're done, you let it go
Mm.
and it's gone.
Yeah.
And I think for my oldest son, there's a lot of that. Is I think over the years he's learned how to do that. I think he can probably get better. I think, for my younger son who's playing, one of the things in terms of coping strategy is, how do you handle it when you get talked back to by another player on your team?
Mm.
Where in the rules of the game that he plays, the goalkeeper has to say, right? The goalkeeper is the one who tells you how it's going to be. And if somebody mouths back to you, or they don't listen or whatever, they disrespect you, how do you handle that? The natural tendency is going to be a lot of times to shut down and just whatever. But you know what? Play's still going on. You also don't want a full scale fight to go off either. And so there are strategies you got to figure out on how do you handle communication that isn't really the way that it should be. How do you hold somebody accountable? Do you wait till there's a stop and play? Do you talk to them at halftime? You please don't go talk to the coach and tell the coach to talk to him for you. I mean, come on, man. So I think there's a lot of ways to handle it, and there is a prescribed coaching strategy in there for a player to figure out how to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the things you're talking about, that blade of grass, this is what I would call a reload. So when we reload, we relax, we release, which you're saying release that energy into the grass.
Yep,
We relax, we release, and we refocus. So we refocus on our ABC. So having a coping strategy there from a lifetime perspective, like sports is one thing, but man, when we get out and in the beer hockey league, when we're actually adulting and
yep,
and doing things on our own, we have to be able to work with people with multiple generations. And that's
that's
one
right.
thing. Just as a side note, I just thought of this, is that when the school systems that we're in, is not really a reality of how we interact with people. When do you ever interact with everybody the same age?
That's right.
I mean, you just don't do it, and
Nope,
so being able to reload, you know, and work with different people as you're frustrated in the workforce is a great life skill to have.
yeah,
So that's super powerful. And again, as a parent, we put our children into places where we want to see them thrive, and sports sometimes, maybe most of the times, doesn't give us that opportunity for them to thrive. They're
right.
in valleys. They don't want to be there. They're losing. They don't like their coach. They're not on a winning team. And so how do we cope with that as a parent and put on the best experience for them is a tricky environment to navigate.
Well, yeah, because I mean, it doesn't take much for you to be able to say something over top of your child for them to think that now that's the new goal.
Hmm.
Where, if you played sports and let's say you only got to high school and you wanted to go to college, or, you wanted to go into juniors, in hockey or whatever, and you never got to, you can easily state that over your kid, and all of a sudden they now are living up to the bar that you set for them.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I've tried so hard not to do that. Just going through the recruiting experience right now with my older son, is I've tried so hard not to say, well, when I got recruited, and then fill in the blank, and it's easy to do, and I messed it up. I've said it a couple times, but times are different. But I don't want them to feel value or less value if they do or do not get there.
Mm-hmm.
I need them to go through the experience of getting there, regardless of whether they make it or not, so they can take it with them the rest of their life. Because guess what? For every promotion I've put in my career, you think I've gotten it every time? No, I've had to go back to times I got cut, athletically, to think about, oh man, I didn't get that promotion that I really wanted to. I applied for that deal, I didn't get it. And all of a sudden it stirs up emotions, and you have memories. You go back to when you didn't get picked for something in a sport, and you got to think about, how did I handle that? What was my initial response? How did I cope with that? How did I turn that into something great and work through that? Speaking about kids, I mean, that's something that I have a 17 and a 6-year-old that we're talking about. That's something my 16-year-old has had to battle, goodness, Dave, since he was probably 8 or 9. Every year he would show up. Like, he shows up one year and he gets put on, we had 4 different levels that you could play at. He gets to level 4 and he feels gypped at this point. He's like, I'm better than that. Well, the next year he jumps 2 levels to the second level, stays there for a while. Then we switch soccer clubs. He gets sent back down again, has to work his way back up. Then we switch to another club. He gets sent back down again, has to work his way up to where we are now. And you've got 4 U19s, and he's a 2005, and 2 of them are 2004s. And guess what? He gets sent down again, so he gets more playing time. And I'm going, look, you've been through this 4 times. You know how to do this by now. You know the work it's going to take. You're mentally tough. You're not going to let it derail you. And he looks at me and goes, oh, yeah, Dad, I'm good. I'm good because I figure it just gives me another year to get better and more time in the gym to work out. I'll be bigger, faster, stronger, and I will dominate when I get back next year. Yep, I'm good.
Yeah. No, you bring up a really good point in terms of peaks and valleys. And one of the things I always start off my sessions with is saying, okay, I know there's people out there that subscribe to this idea that everything's awesome all the time. I just don't believe life works that way. Life is about peaks and valleys, and we're managing the peaks and managing the valleys, and the coping strategies that we put together. It's kind of like a toolbox, for you to go to when you're in a valley to help you with that valley so you can go back on a peak. And I think as a parent, a lot of times we forget that they don't have an adult brain, right? And we want them to think like we think, and it's just not how they think. And their world is just like our world is peaks and valleys. And so if we can provide empathy in those peaks and valleys, understand that, you know what, it's going to be okay. I do value your courage. I do value your leadership in what you're doing right now. It may not feel like leadership to us as parents, but for them, it's big time leadership. And understanding that, I do want to add this too, because you threw out another really cool thing. When we're in the valley, what's the single biggest attribute that we're going to use to move on to be successful in anybody, in the basic tenets of a human? And I would say it's debatable. Everything's debatable these days, but I would say confidence is the number one thing we want our kids to get out of sports. Like, how do we develop confidence so that they can achieve whatever they put their minds to? Statistically, they're not going to be a pro hockey player, a pro soccer player. So how do we put them in environments where they can build their confidence? And so one of the things I've been chatting with a recruiter for my son lately is, that next level for him. He's playing 18U AAA hockey for a top 5 program in the country. And his next step would be juniors. And we're having conversations now of, hey man, maybe it's not the USHL you want to go to. maybe it's the MJ where you can actually play. Like putting yourself in an environment that's like it's really awesome, like the USHL. But what if you don't play? Is that building confidence? You want to go NCAA Div 1 on a scholarship like everybody does, but are you going to play? Why don't
Yep.
we go club, maybe a Liberty solution where you're actually playing every night, right? Where you can build confidence and camaraderie and community around your team. Like that's a better idea as a parent to have your children play than the NCAA Div 1 scholarship or the USHL in terms of hockey. I don't know what it be
Yep.
for soccer, but like just
Yeah.
understanding that the confidence is a big attribute to build upon.
Well, yeah, we started having the same conversation with my 17-year-old 2 years ago. He wanted to play Division One ACC, which is the best. ACC is the best conference in the country, hands down, and it has been for years. And you know, I mean, how hard it is to be able to get on a roster on an ACC school, and then on top of that, play. And as a freshman, how many years are you gonna have to sit and just work and not get playing time?
Right.
And that conversation turns into, well, look at other Division One schools, look at other Division Two schools, look at Division Three schools, looks at NAIA schools. Like, you want to be able to make sure you get that balance. And obviously, everyone who's listening, we care about their academics. We want them to do well. We're not saying we don't, but we want them to be in a situation where they can get a lot of playing time and they can build that, right? Because confidence happens when they figure out how to handle situations in repeated amounts. So I've handled this situation enough that now I have confidence in it because I know what to do.
Yeah.
And if you're not put in a situation that you know what to do, how are you going to build your confidence?
Yeah, so let's break that down a little bit because confidence is having the skill set and the belief that you can accomplish a task, right? And so a lot of times, if we get into an environment that's bigger than us or a venue that's bigger than us, we go, you know what? I don't have the skill set and the belief in my skill set to accomplish this task under this pressure.
That's
And
right.
so those skills have to be built up and they have to be repeatable where they're autonomous, where you can just automatically do that task, right? And then you slowly scale the venue.
But I think the piece to that is you've got to put yourself in that situation. You have to put
That's right.
yourself in those situations so you can apply all of that. And that's what we're talking about. If you're not in the situation, what are you going to do? You're going to create it on the side. Good luck with that.
You're not going to. That's right. So playing is part of that. So putting yourself in a position where you can play and build on those skills, right, regardless of the venue, is building confidence. So it's the past achievements that we're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, Dave, it's the same thing you see in a golf swing. You can do your practice swing all day, but when it's time to hit the ball, tell me if your actual swing looks at all like your practice swing.
That's right.
It's probably harder. It's
Yeah.
probably faster. The weight shift is probably different. Your hand release might be different too. Like, come on. I mean, but that's the idea is when it's time to go, you've got to be able to build that confidence and know how you're going to handle yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more than just that. Again, we're talking about student athletes. Like, it's the confidence of how do I handle it? And this is a real life deal for everybody who's listening. If you're a student athlete and you go to a big time program, yeah, you're going to be faced with all sorts of things you haven't thought about. How do you handle fans? How do you handle girls? How do you handle if you're a male? How do you handle the pressures of whether it's drinking, whether it's drugs, whether it's performance enhancing drugs, whatever. And people can say, well, I mean, you make your decision beforehand, so when you get there, you don't have to figure it out. Let me tell you something. When it comes down to it, you're in the moment of pressure, great. I'm glad you made your decision, but there's a lot of things that could drag you away from that decision you made before the pressure started. Mm-hmm. All that stuff leads up to that. It's not just your play on the field. It goes back to what you talked about, being a man of character, a person of character. How are you going to make those decisions when the pressure mounts? Because it's more than just where the puck goes or where the ball bounces.
That's good. That's good. All right, let's wrap up here. As a parent, what do you want in your sons through sports? What do you want?
I would tell you, for me, I mean, I want them to be great men, great men of God who love him first and foremost. I want them to be people to be, men that value people, that understand that the greatest way to build influence, whether you're on the field, on the ice, in a boardroom, is to add value to people. That's how you build influence. That's the number one way. The second way is to build it through performance. But if you just figure out how to add value to people, that's encouraging people, showing things you've learned, being vulnerable about the mistakes you've made so that they can get better. If my boys can do that, where they're a man of God first, and they're a great human, great leader, great man, and they've figured out how to add value to people, I am good. Because in all that comes mental toughness, comes confidence, comes people skills, all the things that I think we realize are even more important when we get older. Maybe we didn't think they were that important when we were younger.
Yeah. So as a parent out there, if you're listening, yelling at the referees, having private time with the coach about time on the field or on the ice, right? Are we adding value to people when we do that?
No.
We're not. And I think that goes back to, why do I want my son or daughter in sports? And I think, if you're hearing these words, you may have to think about why you're there and what you're doing, because, I love this adding value to people idea. I love what you brought up, Dave, in terms of encouraging, loving the courage, loving the leadership. Those are beautiful, awesome words because you're now adding value to them, right? Versus, why aren't you playing more? I'm going to talk to the coach.
Please don't do that, mom and dad. Please don't do that. It's going to make it worse. They're going to ride the pine, and they have only one place to look when they're out there during the game. The coach is going to be looking at you. The kid's trying to figure out what happened. Why did my world cave in?
There's a USA Hockey statistic out there that says the biggest drop off is second year Bantams, which they would be 15, 16 years old. And I believe that's because at that point, they're able to make a decision whether they want to play this sport without the influence of their parents. And that happens to be the answer happens to be no, I don't want to do this anymore because of the environments we've created at 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. When it comes time for them to make a decision to play, they don't want to play because they know how mom and dad acted around the rink, or in your case, the soccer field. And so I think just encouraging parents to love, to really show empathy and love for their son or daughter with encouraging words by adding value to them is the word I'm getting, and just great message, man.
Thank you. Well, I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, our focus as parents has to be the man or woman that they are going to become versus the player that they could be. Oh my gosh, it's night and day different.
Yeah. So that's awesome. All right. So as we finish up, I just want to encourage you to, how, as a parent with a son or daughter in sports, if you don't plan to win, if you don't plan to add value to people, if you don't plan to say encouraging words, then you're planning to fail. So let's not fail as parents, but let's go provide words of encouragement. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you, man. You're awesome.